Hi again, everyone. My name is Amherst Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, and I want to welcome you to another one of our CLHO colleague circles. Today we have a conversation on a topic that is clearly of interest, especially given the fact that we have over 80 people signed up for this session, encouraging collaboration between educators and history institutions. And we have a great group of people here today, both from the history and the education side of things, and people who blend them both in their work. And I want to give a special thanks to Steve Armstrong, who helped pull this panel together and start a larger conversation about something that is, I think, on everybody's minds, kind of in the background all of the time, but is of special importance at this moment now during COVID, and as we face a very unusual and uncertain fall and new school year. So I just want to go over a couple of logistics. Please feel free to locate that chat function in Zoom if you haven't done so already. If you don't see the Zoom controls, you can move your mouse around. You'll find the chat option at the bottom. If you hit that, you can introduce yourself to the group. It's great to get a sense of who's here and help the panelists know who is on the call. And this is where we'll be taking your questions as we go. The format for today, each of our panelists is going to speak for about 5 minutes, a little bit about what they're doing at their own institutions. And we just ask, especially during the presentations, that everyone else who's not on the panel mute your audio and video. And if you're not speaking, it's good practice to mute your audio as well. I will be monitoring the chat for questions as we go, and I'll queue those up for our panelists after they've finished their presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a chat. You can chat to me directly, or you can send it to everyone. I'll keep an eye on it. And we hope to have plenty of time for conversation afterwards. And if anyone wants to ask a more involved question where you want to say it verbally, please just let me know in the chat and I can unmute you, or let you unmute your video, and you can ask the panelists directly. So without further ado, I'm going to get rid of my slide and hand things over to Steve Armstrong, who wears many hats. So I'll actually let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Amherst. My name's Steve Armstrong. I'm the social studies consultant for the Connecticut State Department of Education. And please don't ask in the chat box, what are we definitively suggesting to schools in the fall? Because we don't know that yet. But I think the issue at hand is museum educator collaboration is a critical issue on both sides. I've talked to many teachers on, what do they have? How can they help us? And I've talked to many museum folks, and the question is, well, who do I call at the school if we want to get them involved? So these are the type of questions that we hope that we'll be able to address and answer today. I think for those that know at all the Connecticut State Social Studies frameworks, please know that there's if you know the inquiry process, I think in some districts, that's a process that can really bring educators and museum folks together, having kids investigate things. So if there's certainly, if you want to know if somebody, a teacher or a museum educator wants to know why to do this, go to the Connecticut State Social Studies frameworks and you can certainly find justification for that. So let's go. The order we're going to go is David, if you would be gracious enough to go first.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you so much for inviting me. Hello, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces on the panel, on the webinar today. I am the Director of Education and Outreach at the Florence Griswold Museum in Old Lyme. And, we too closed down almost immediately in March and had to figure out how we could offer some of our services online and digitally. The Florence Griswold Museum is like a 12-acre campus. It tells a story of a sea captain's daughter who opened her house to artists at the turn of the last century, and they painted on the doors and walls of her historic house. But we also have gardens, grounds, and a contemporary looking gallery that we show temporary exhibitions. We were really fortunate, and this is kind of by dumb luck, but last fall we had an exhibition of insects in our historic house that we knew was temporary, and we did not want to lose it. And so we invested in digitizing that installation by using a local company. And we were really blown away by the ease of doing it and the product. And so people can go on our website now and revisit that experience very easily. And so we had that done. And then when March happened and COVID happened, we pivoted really quickly and asked that same company to digitize our current exhibition and our entire historic house. And within weeks, all of our experiences were up virtually. Now, that didn't mean we knew exactly what we were doing with them, but we had the product. And so we were able to direct educators who couldn't physically come to the museum to our online resources. And so we look forward to doing that really from now on. The museum just opened up an exhibition called Fresh Fields, American Impressionistic Landscapes, in which we invited outside scholars to comment on these landscapes. So pretty impressionist paintings now have issues of slavery and Native American property as part of our labeling. So we're really excited about that, and we've digitized all of that and put all the label copy up. So we're trying our best to make sure that when teachers need resources, and you can't physically visit, even though that's the ideal situation, in this interim, the digital world and these virtual tours are really a remarkable thing. I think what I'd love to do is suggest that teachers use those virtual tools and then set up a Zoom meeting with staff so that we can really make the connection either pre-visit or post-visit, the visit being virtual. Because really, we love, we are there for teachers, and if we can do it on a Zoom platform, so much the better. One last thing I want to just talk about is prior to any of this, the museum invested a great deal of energy in trying to mine a single painting. Right behind me, you see this Currier and Ives looking painting by George Dury. It's a painting in our collection, and we spent over a year developing an online web resource to teach Connecticut art and history through one painting. And so over the last year, I've been sending out over 1,000 free teaching posts to anyone who asks for them. Teachers can use them either in the classroom or in their houses to talk about, using the painting as a primary object to kind of look at and start asking questions about, and then going to the museum's website where there are films and background information and games and activities that can bring this primary resource to life. So I'm going to put all the virtual tours and the connections to the Sea Change project and the free teaching poster in the comments. And I look forward to answering any questions about how our museum and other museums in the area are really trying to be as open and as helpful and as friendly to teachers. There's no just calling up and asking or sending an email, and we'll do our best to accommodate your needs. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, David. Sally Whipple?
Thank you, Steve. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Democracy Center at Connecticut's Old State House, which is a 1796 state capitol in the center of Hartford. And our work is to bring history and civics together. We always say that you can't understand the world without history, and you can't change it without civics. So we're the place where those two things meet. And then in March, nobody could meet there anymore. So that presented a real problem for us and everybody else. But what we immediately did, on one hand, we run Connecticut History Day, which is a statewide program, and we were in the middle of that program when everything shut down. But the schools didn't all close at once, as you may recall. Some schools remained open. So we had a lot to juggle, and we very quickly had to turn 4 regional and 1 state contests into virtual experiences. And that was for hundreds of kids and hundreds of volunteers as well. So we were working on pivoting state history or History Day to a virtual world, which was a huge challenge, which took up an enormous amount of time. On the other hand, we had field trips that were all canceled. And that, of course, is one of our big sources of income, is spring field trips. So when those canceled, we immediately reached out to teachers who normally did field trips with us. We reached out to everybody who had to cancel, and then we reached out to everybody who had been there in the fall. And we offered them things that would help them teach the lessons that they needed to teach had they been coming on the field trip. And we tried to make our staff available to them too. And now that the summer is here and we're moving on, we have spent a lot of time talking to teachers, and we have spent a lot of time thinking about how we pivot for every different model that is being explored for the return this fall. And I can tell you that what we've learned from talking to teachers is that they are amazing. They're living in so much uncertainty now. I mean, we all are, but they are really living in real uncertainty about what the future will bring to their classrooms. At least in the spring, when they had to start distance learning immediately, they knew their students already. When they come back in the fall, not only will they not know these students, but these are kids who have been isolated in many ways and have missed a lot of the learning that they normally would have had. So I really worship our teachers for what they're going through and what they're handling. But we felt that the best thing we could do would be to reach out to them. So when we want to solve a problem, we call teachers we know and we say, hey, what would help you? And what can we learn from you that will help us? And I'll just say that briefly, what we have learned is that if you're trying to turn programs into virtual experiences, it can be very challenging because it's the Wild West out there. Some districts are using Google Classroom, some are using Zoom, some are using something I've never heard of before. So our staff is running to catch up and try to learn these different platforms and learn what will work and learn what we can offer, in addition to developing content. So it is difficult to do that, but it is worthwhile. We also know that teachers are facing challenges that we would never think of. So if you're a teacher on a Zoom meeting with your students, you're seeing their homes, they're seeing your home. And that is like a whole wall of privacy that is gone between teacher and students in many cases. So teachers are dealing with issues that we just really wouldn't think about. And so we found that trying to understand the full situation that these teachers are in is really, really helpful to us, because we want to understand the best way that we can help them. We also heard in the beginning that teachers were bombarded with opportunities and materials, and oh my gosh, how do you pick what you're going to use? So we are trying to keep things very simple, trying to find out exactly what they need so that we can supply what they need that is plug and play. They don't have to read through a bunch of stuff to figure out how to do something. And I'll just finish by saying that we run the Kid Governor program, Connecticut's Kid Governor, which starts up in the fall with an election for a 5th grade Kid Governor. And that program has to change almost completely in how it is done, because a lot of it depends on kids campaigning, personal contact, voting, which is going to be another issue this fall. So that program we are deep into changing with the help of many teachers. We're exploring different platforms and ways of doing things. But what we're learning is that if you taught colonial cooking in your museum, now you have to find like 3 different ways to teach that so that the teachers can help the students who learn in different ways that they are working with from home or maybe in the classroom. And you need to provide variety without overwhelming people. And what I'm saying all sounds impossible, and that's only because it is completely impossible. This all takes a lot of time and effort. And so the last thing I'll say is that I hope that what can come from this is that museums can come together and really share what they're doing and share their resources and the how-tos, because that can be the hardest part, just figuring out how the heck do I do this.
Thank you, Sally. Allison?
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see all of these people participating in a webinar. It's definitely refreshing. I'm Allison Nori. I am a social studies / English language learner teacher at Fairfield Ward High School in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I teach civics and United States history to the English language learner population down there in an academy that we run, and then I also teach world history to the regular tracked students there. And some of you may know me who are on the chat, I can see, I spent over 10 years working in museums myself, both on the education end and on the curatorial end. And so, one, I'm here to kind of field any questions from you guys, and I'll give you all my contact information as a bridge to facilitate any kind of questions that you may have about utilizing, to Sally's point, some of the resources, many of the resources that you as history organizations have to offer social studies teachers. I kind of want to start by, I mean, we all know the challenges that we all face. As teachers, we face it, but as museums, you guys face it. I didn't have to worry about, you know, being furloughed or anything like that. And I know that those are kind of additional worries that you guys have in your field. But what I will say is I'd rather start with this idea of, you know, the C3 frameworks, which we as social studies teachers are, you know, loosely bound to follow. And they, you know, they create, I hope you're familiar with them, but if you're not, they create a set of frameworks which are considered best practice for history teachers teaching in the public schools. And one of the major components of those frameworks is to work with history organizations, for teachers to work with history organizations to build a sense of community, and also so students can access their local historical organizations, understand their own history, and subsequently and optimistically understand their own identities as well. And so one of the things that history teachers in a K-12 environment are really well trained to do is utilize the resources that you all have. And Sally kind of touched on this as well, they're not looking for lesson plans. They're not looking for anything that is multiple pages long. They're looking for a quick link or a well-curated list of primary source document material that they can then take, because you've done the work of professional historians and said, this is of value. So then a teacher can come and kind of do the more mechanical aspect of it and take it and utilize it however they see fit. And given that, you know, there's a lot of open-ended questions about whether or not schools are going to be going back to a fully digital model, whether we're going to be actually in the classroom, the governor says we are, but that could change, or whether we're going to be kind of adherent to a hybrid model where classes might be digital partially and partially in the classroom. Teachers are going to have to plan on the fly for a long time coming. And to have access, to be able to know that you can go to the Florence Griswold website, to the education tab, and just have 5 primary source documents that you, or paintings, whatever it might be, that you can access quickly and then distill as a teacher is wildly beneficial to people in our particular boat. And then, like, the other thing too is, which is of incredible value, is being able to create any kind of digital content that can be pushed out and used at any given time. In other words, like, I know a lot of places, like, they're doing like digital field trips and stuff, which is awesome. But as K-12 educators, we might be really strapped for time, or we might get thrown kind of a wild card situation where we have to cancel, or we have to, you know, finagle, and it puts everybody in kind of an awkward situation. But if you had like a 10-minute video that, you know, I could use, I could contact you, you could send me, I could use as a pre-teaching thing or just in substitute of something, that would be awesome. And the last thing I'm going to say is that skills are really important, teaching skills in the K-12 environment. And part of that is stipulated in the C3 frameworks. And one of the things that, you know, you as history organizations have that we really don't in a K-12 history environment is that skill concept. Like, how do you curate documents? How do you know what's good? How do you know what's not so good? Just because it's old doesn't necessarily mean it's a great resource either. And so those are the kind of skills that, you know, students and teachers are expected to assess and look for. And I know, like, for example, I do a lot with artifacts and material culture. Being able to have just access to a curator from one of your museums to say to students, not to provide materials, but to give students a down and dirty lesson about, here's how you do archaeology. Here's how you interpret what a valuable artifact is. That is so much more invaluable than having something that is formulaic or that you've spent all these hours on that we're not going to use, that you've put up on your website. So the skill-based stuff is going to be really important, but please know the value that you have to us as teachers, as history organizations, especially given the current political situation. It's an election year. Being able, in a world of fake news, to point to a museum or an organization like the Connecticut Old State House and say, no, this is a primary source document. I didn't make it up. This isn't Fox News. This isn't CNN. It's not coming. It is coming straight from the horse's mouth. that is the most invaluable thing in terms of our toolkit and ammunition that we as teachers can have. So the more of that that you have that you can source and just throw up on your sites, the better. So thank you all very much. And thank you, Steve.
Yep, thank you, Allison. Tony Roy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on here, Steve. And I'm so happy to be here with just so many giants in the community here. I mean, Sally and David and Allison and Jen. And I mean, I could just keep going. There's so many great people that are on this call. So I'm really honored to be here. Again, I'm Tony Roy. I am a high school social studies teacher. I'm passionate about local history, and I'm also the CCSS board president. And I just came off of the NCSS board, just ended my term. One thing that I really love about doing my job is being able to get into some place-based education. It's probably something I've focused on. I mean, I've been teaching for 10 years. I've been focused on it for probably about 8 years or so. And, you know, I've been to great places like the Old State House and the Hartford History Center. We've even done some like art-based events that were down on Pratt Street when they have their things going on that's sponsored by the Greater Hartford Arts Council. You know, there's just really so many great things that we can do when we're working with museums. You know, you could go to parks, or you could go to the Stove Center, or even to cemeteries and memorials. There's just so much history that's all around. You know, but the problem that we're especially facing now with coronavirus, but even before, it's the transportation. It's the block of being able to get to these places that becomes one of the biggest barriers for teachers and students to access museums and other cultural locations, places, if you will. You know, so one thing that's been really great about coronavirus is that we are really looking at how is it that we can access these places, materials and spaces digitally, virtually, if you will. You know, so someone was asking before, you know, how is it that we can pivot, or how is it that we can serve teachers? That's what David was asking just a moment ago. And I think providing these digital experiences that are high quality, right, are really good. I would not say let's put together, you know, your old video that you had from the 1980s on a VHS and put that now into a webinar. I don't think that that's really what we're looking for as teachers. Just to kind of go back to what Allison was saying just a minute ago about, you know, we're really looking for these hands-on experiences. And back when we were going to museums, I was always hoping that they were going to pull out something that we could hold, something that we can interpret, some kind of source work that we could do in order to give kids that experience, students that experience of what it is, the hands-on work that a historian does, that someone that's in art interpretation, that they actually do. Like, let's get young people out there and experiencing what it's like to work in the field. I think that's a real experience that students would love to have. Teachers would love them to have, because it aligns back with the college and career readiness framework that Allison was so eloquently speaking about before. It's really the dimension 3, that's the source work, that's the interpretation of sources. I think that's one place that teachers really can have some, you know, they could use some help in that. You know, also another thing we could do is, you know, maybe we're looking at some, back to David, you know, we're looking at some artwork and we're facilitating a really excellent discussion about that artwork, where the curators and the people that are in museum interpretation, the thing that they're really great about is creating space. Well, how can we take that creating space and put that into a digital online format? Right? Are there some questions that you can bring through the years of experience that you've had working with people and working with sources and facilitating deliberative dialogue? Also, you know, back to the thing about the materials, I would say, in addition to having some really great sources, I would challenge organizations to try to put together an inquiry toolkit. If you're a place that has materials, how is it that you can look at sources, but through a lens of a question, a curated question that you've been working on in the field that students could interpret at their own level, right? So then they can go one step further beyond just looking at the sources and interpreting it, right? Can they create some sort of argument about it? Is there some sort of narrative that they could build about it? And that is the work that we're really looking for. You know, back to Sally's point about keeping it simple, I totally agree with that. Let's not have a million different ways that we're accessing, you know, I mean, I don't want to say everyone should be using Zoom, you know what I mean? But like, you know, I wouldn't be looking for what's the newest and best technology that kids can use. You know, I don't know, like there's so many different ways that we can actually just keep it simple. Let me just keep it that way. The easier, the better. And, you know, well, I just want to do a plug just really quickly. You know, as the president of CCSS, I want to just let everyone know that we have a conference coming up in November. It's Connected, our community, nation, and world. We're looking for exhibitors, proposals, sponsorship. I don't think anybody's got any money, but, you know, sponsorships, you know what I mean? We're looking for these things. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people into a digital space. It's going to be a fully comprehensive conference. There's going to be time where you're going to be networking. There's going to be breakout workshops. We're going to have keynotes. It's going to be the whole thing. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to show that, you know, yes, we can interact in these digital spaces, but also it's going to be an opportunity for teachers and exhibitors to get together and really kind of talk about how is it that we can collaborate. What can I bring to the table? And that's what we're really looking for in these workshops. I mean, this would be a great time to get in there with a workshop. Flo Grizz, come in with a workshop about some of the artwork that you have and say, hey, teachers, you know, you could do this right in your classroom because we're already doing it online. So again, it's just a way. I mean, it's price to sell. I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to turn to a parcel salesman and tell you what the prices are. But I'm telling you, this is an environment where we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And I would love to see what people could bring to the table and really open teachers' eyes about what's out there. So I guess my thing is become visible, right? Accessible, have equitable access. I think that's what teachers are looking for. And that'll be it for me for now. Thank you very much.
Amherst, maybe there could be some questions or comments?
Great, yeah. We've had I've been sharing some resources in the chat, and if anyone has any other resources, David shared a bunch of things from Flo Grizz. I shared some stuff around the C3 frameworks that Allison mentioned and the CCSS Fall Conference. But, you know, one question that I might ask is if you have any related kind of, for people who aren't coming from an educator's background, you know, understanding what an inquiry toolkit looks like, where are some of the places that you might go for resources around that? I think those sorts of things might be useful to share if you have any links that you can share in the chat. Our first question is from Beth Rose, who's one of our board members as well. She wants to know, where do you as teachers go when you are looking for material related to Connecticut history or museums? Where are you finding that? How are you finding historical resources that are local?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Well,
I was just going to say CTH is amazing, but go ahead. Go
well,
ahead.
and I was going to say the Connecticut State Library as well. Tony and I are sort of spoiled in that Tony is married to a nonprofit museum professional, and I am a former nonprofit museum professional. So we might be like, the deck might be stacked in our favor in terms of finding resources. But I do know, I can speak for colleagues who, when they're looking for things, they'll usually start super local. So I teach down in Fairfield. A lot of my colleagues will just shoot an email to like Lori down at the Fairfield Museum and say, hey, Lori, I'm teaching this. Do you have anything related to like Fairfield history and blah, blah, blah. And Lori will go through the collections and say, oh yeah, I got something on the Pequot War, and she'll scan it and send it over. So, I mean, like just as a generic blanket statement, a lot of teachers start super local and then expand from there if they don't know where to look.
Yeah, I was going to say ConnecticutHistory.org is an amazing resource. You know, well, I was just doing some research on women's right to vote in Connecticut, and where was I? That has amazing, the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame has amazing resources, even just to kind of put your toe in to see what's out there, and then you could do your own research. I mean, I think teachers are innovative with their crafty internet searches, and there's more and more things that are coming online. And I think someone had asked, like, where do I go if I'm looking for like one of these inquiries? Like, one place that's really great is African American Connecticut Explored. I mean, they have a really wonderful inquiry that developed. The Wadsworth is coming out with a really excellent inquiry for middle school students that is using some of their pieces from their collection. So those are kind of the places that we're going. You know, and again, I think it's you got to do your own kind of research and then you know, if I wanted to learn about the genius that used to be on top of the Capitol, you know, you'd have to go to the state library to learn anything about that. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of trying to piece things together.
And, you know, the other thing I will say too is that this is a great, you know, kind of opportunity for the league to potentially have a one-stop shop for teachers, because there is so much, and Connecticut being as old as it is and as locally controlled as it is, there's just so much stuff out there. And there's not, I know, like, just from my own experience in terms of smaller museums, there's not a ton of cross communication between probably what's going on in Sprague with a local history organization and what might be going on in Litchfield with a local history organization. And so, you know, to be able to just say, check out, you know, the Connecticut League's website, or, you know, here's the link to teachers or colleagues of mine, would be really helpful for them too.
Anyone that's looking for anything on Hartford history, the Hartford History Center, which is inside the Hartford Public Library, I mean, amazing. I mean, they got directories, maps. I mean, they got all kinds of, I mean, they just got so much. Go in there, meet them. You know, I mean, Jasmine Augusta. Anyway, so there's really great people. It's just knowing the folks to reach out to. I mean, Connecticut Historical Society, I mean, should have brought that up probably first or second. I mean, they have wonderful stuff too. So there's a lot of really amazing resources. And again, like Allison was saying, it really has to do with that hyper local aspect. I think that's what teachers are looking for right now. Just how can they tell the national story through a local lens?
Yeah, one question that I often get from our league members is, you know, how to make that connection and how to make themselves, you know, sort of more available to their local educators who, you know, are, you know, have a lot of things, you know, everybody's got a lot to do. And I'm wondering if you have other advice. You know, you said a little bit about where you find teachers sort of tending to go, you know, a locally known institution, or maybe some of the larger state institutions or web-based resources that are out there. Are there any other strategies that you might recommend for especially sort of smaller local history institutions who may not be as well known in their community as, say, the Fairfield Museum? How do they make that connection and make their stuff more accessible and make themselves more sort of findable and discoverable to interested educators? Are there strategies that you would recommend on that front?
I have two.
David, could you start off with that, and then we'll move to the teachers? David, would you have some thoughts, and then Allison?
Well, we just love it when you know, people reach out to us just through the website and send us an email. I mean, if you don't have exactly what you know, if you don't see what you want, we are more than happy to tailor some of our projects for the needs. And so, but again, how we reach out, you know, we do a lot of social media, and we just hope that falls. You know, we tell people, you know, tell your teacher. So it's kind of passing it along. One of the things that's kind of been a phenomenon is that the free teaching poster was posted on a free materials for teachers website that went global. And I still don't know how it happened, but I've been sending out packages to Pakistan and to you know, countries all over Europe as well as the United States. So trying to tap into some of these teacher resources. Teachers who love a product will share that product with other teachers. And so I guess just making a few inroads to teachers, making yourself super accessible, making it really easy, and then it kind of goes from there. But again, we always try to do we try to be as visible on social media as possible so that teachers will think of us when they have a question or an issue or something that they want to discover a little deeper, if that helps.
Allison, you were going to say?
I was going to say the same, but also the opposite as David. Cold calling goes a long way. So, you know, teachers often will just send feeler emails out to see if there's resources available. I would recommend also doing the opposite, especially if you don't have the same like social media foot traffic as like a FloGriz or a Mark Twain House. You might want to just reach out to the head of curriculum for the local districts around you, or the department heads at certain schools, or even the guidance departments, which a lot of people don't think to utilize, or the library media departments, because they're the ones who really distribute resources across the building. One teacher will typically use the resources for themselves, and they might mention to another teacher, like, oh yeah, Florence Griswold had this awesome like lesson plan. Why don't you email them and ask for a copy? But then, like, you know, if COVID hits or whatever, you forget to email Florence Griswold and the whole thing, like, you just forget. But if it goes through the library will continue to send emails to everybody in district. And I mentioned guidance departments as well, because if you are looking to, say, digitize your collections and you don't have money and would like free labor, do an internship program with high school kids. You know, it's a great way of doing the skill-based stuff, the inquiry-based model. It's a great way of having an exchange. It's a great way of students being able to understand history, and it builds relationships and community in the way that you really want from the ground up, versus you guys being there as a break glass in case of emergency type situation. You don't want to be that. You want to be like one of the first calls of, oh yeah, let me just call David. David will know what to do. So those would be my words of advice.
Could I also offer a suggestion that when you're reaching out to schools, know what grade, and this is again through studying the frameworks perhaps, know what grade you're offering this to. I mean, if you have a program on X, know where X fits into the social studies curriculum. Is it an 8th grade thing? Is it a high school thing? Is it an elementary school thing? So you know when you're going there, when you're contacting a school, who the right grade level is you're getting that through. You're getting to, and that would just be looking at what you're offering and how it matches with the state frameworks.
I think Steve makes a great point on that about knowing your audience. I would also say that we know that organizations are all kind of scrambling for the same nonprofit pool of money, right? I'm wondering if there's a way that there could be a little more of a collaborative approach to creating a menu, let's say, of the different types of school experiences that teachers might be interested in. And this way, it's not, I just think that we're all kind of fighting over the same small bit of money. And if we could come together and work together, that you could probably spread that out a little bit further. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure how easy that would be.
Tony, I think that's a really good point. And I think it's something that can carry into the future, because we're not just doing this for COVID. Everything we're talking about is going to last forever. We're going to carry all of these new skills and platforms and knowledge into the future. So I think we really do need to work together. And I also think we need to start thinking of this as not a scramble, but as an investment. So we're putting a lot of time into figuring things out, and it's an investment. And right now, I know I hear everybody talking about, well, how are we going to monetize this kind of virtual program or that kind of virtual program? That stuff is really important. But that right now, our job is to take care of the kids of Connecticut. And that is job number one. And if we don't have enough resources, and we never do, the only way to expand that right now is to work together. So we really do need to do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Oh, sorry. And I was just going to say, to Sally's point, like, coming from the social studies, we're certified, and Tony can attest to this, to teach like approximately 6 trillion different types of things. And so in any given year, you might be teaching 5 completely different subjects. Like, you might have one civics class, one world history class, one economics class, it really runs the gamut. And so to be able to have that kind of collaborative experience amongst history organizations, to say, even if it manifests in terms of a subscription to the league that gives you access to materials from different organizations that are pulled together, where you could monetize it and everybody kind of wins. And I could go in and say, okay, I got to teach world history this year and I have to teach civics, but I know if I go to the league's website, they'll have stuff for everything and I can access it because I'm a subscriber, or my district is a subscriber. however that works. That one-stop shop thing is super important because you don't just teach all US history one year. You teach like 4 or 5 different things that are all over the place.
Yeah, and I will add, Allison, to your point of like one-stop shopping, the league has been having conversations with folks at Connecticut Humanities just kind of on this topic of, we know there are so many digital resources being created right now, and we know the fall is really uncertain. So we're in conversations about trying to think about how we can, aggregate a lot of that content and make it more findable instead of having to go to, every historical society webpage around Connecticut to find resources. So, stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be something that we can do along those lines. There's a lot of work behind those sorts of things. But if anyone has, we're happy to serve as a clearinghouse for some of this information. So if you have resources that you want to share, please send them our way, and we can do our best about trying to at least put them up on our website, if nothing else. We had a question about ways to monetize the sorts of work that people are doing. Sally kind of alluded to this. A question from Kim with the lost revenue from canceled field trips, what are places like local museums and historical societies to do? And I guess I would ask a sort of a related question from your educator's standpoint. Is there money for certain kinds of field trip like experiences that's still out there that might be captured by historical societies in the same way that field trip money was before? And I would open this up to the larger group as well. If anyone, who's on the call has ideas about how they're trying to generate some revenue around what they're doing, I'm sure that Kim and the rest of the group would be interested. Go ahead, Sally.
Well, I think this is another thing that we can collaborate on, thinking this through. I personally can't imagine that schools are going to have a lot of field trip money, but they don't have to pay for buses if it's a virtual experience. So we don't know what the market will bear because we have no idea what the market is, I think. But I think maybe there are ways to do memberships or subscriptions or something. I really don't have any idea, but I think that's something that would be just small groups getting together and talking about it would be helpful. I haven't seen any smaller organization that's come up with a good answer for this yet, and even larger ones are struggling with that. And maybe the place you can charge is public programs that can help subsidize some of the school program work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, but, in talks with the district that I'm in, and I can only speak to them, but the money thing is very up in the air currently because of COVID. And what COVID has kind of done is, in addition to showcasing some of the weaknesses of the public school system, it's also shed a lot of light on the strength that a digital model can have as well moving forward. And so, I would bet that there will be monies in order to be secured by local organizations in the future, not necessarily the immediate future, but if you're providing skill sets about how to effectively use digital media and digital content in addition to the actual content you're giving itself, it's like a two-pronged approach. There's a lot of value in that for districts, because I can say that even educators have no idea what to do, how to do this moving forward, and they're taking any help that they can get. And I think that's where you're going to see the money come from. How do you use digital stuff? How do you, and it may be a digital humanities direction to teach students how to use resources, to teach them about the digital humanities, to teach them something as simple as, because we all struggle with this as teachers, what do you put in the Google search bar to get in the direction of where you want to go that's not Wikipedia? That's like all you guys. That's what you do, and you do so well. So it could be something along those lines.
I'll just do a colleague circle where I do my the presentation I used to give to my students on why you need to know the Library of Congress subject headings and why they're totally your friends. Yeah, and why keyword searching won't get you everything. Thank you for those thoughts on this. One of our participants shared a tip that she's used to make connections with local educators. She usually visits one teacher who she knows is receptive, gets to know their curriculum and the timing, and then brings resources to the classroom to leave for a time. Now, this might be something that doesn't port so well to a virtual environment, but maybe there are other ways to think about, what are some good ways to like get resources right in the hands of, a teacher at the right moment, it sounds like is a part of this strategy as well. It's too bad there isn't like a room that you can leave the stuff in anymore. But maybe there will be. Rebecca at Mark Twain had asked a question about how to organize materials on a website to make it easy for teachers to find what they need by form, by grade level, or by topic. And Allison had suggested, by grade level first, and then by topic beyond that. And several people have mentioned Connecticut Humanities Teach It CT website as a good resource, both for thinking about inquiry-based examples and also for the way that they organize the information up there. I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to add to that, making your stuff discoverable and easy for teachers to use on your website.
And this is David, and we just, our website is a labyrinth that we love because there's lots of good information on it. But we, wanting to make the teachers portion that much easier, we have a learn button, and it's very clear that those things are really open to everybody, but they're really for the educators, and we're trying our best to make it, so that they click on and find exactly what they want. But again, it's a challenge, but we are trying our best.
I will just interject here also as a comment. We were talking before about ways of getting stuff out there and not always focusing on all your energies on finding the most up-to-date technology. I'll say that, one of the things that I know Flo Gross has been doing, and you've been doing, David, you're saying you're mailing stuff all over the world. You've put together physical resources for, I think, your summer camps, right, that you've just mailed out to families. And it's like art supplies, it's, hands-on materials. And that might be another way to think about these sorts of things. I know you're doing a summer camp, but, low tech is also really valuable, I think, at this moment as well. That the tangible, in this moment of social distancing, having something that you can really grab and grapple with might be another way to think about it. And I think this goes to our participants' point about, leaving something in the classroom. Maybe there's some ways using old-fashioned methods like paper, I think of like mimeographed, handouts when I was in elementary school, providing those sorts of things, whether they're mailing them out or, mailing them to teachers who can send them out. There may be low-tech ways of doing this as well, especially if your organization, doesn't have a Zoom subscription, isn't wanting to kind of invest money in that sort of thing. Using the resources that you have at your disposal might be a good thing. I don't know what folks on the panel think of that.
One of the things that's currently like up and coming with trending, to your point, is the idea of journaling and doing a lot of free writing in the social studies versus just keeping it strictly to the language arts classroom. So there's a lot of resources available. I'm sure Tony's also familiar that we can provide you if you wanted to do something super low tech like journaling. One of the challenges with working remotely in particular, but doing anything virtually is for the teachers is the assessment component. And how do we grade this and how do we fit it into what the district expects students to learn as well? And so something like journaling really ticks a lot of boxes while also maintaining like kids' mental stamina because they are so tech fatigued at this point that low tech really is good. I would just make sure that you have something assessment based that you can, as your carrot to the stick, say to teachers like here's the assessment component of this as well. It's easy to grade.
And Allison, that makes me think of something that I mentioned at the online teaching webinar that we were both on earlier this summer. The ways in which educators and historical societies and other collecting institutions can perhaps collaborate around documenting this moment. This is a collecting opportunity, and I know we've had a colleague circle around collecting COVID-19 and, collecting other, other up-to-the-minute things that are happening, including protests around social justice. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and the youth perspective isn't always well captured in the documentary record, at least as it is, in like record retention policies in, large institutions. So maybe another way to connect with a local educator would be to, get students, think about getting copies of students' journals or added to the collection, at some later date, that this can become a part of an organization's documenting of history, and students can participate in the making of historical documents. That could be another way to kind of get people involved in that process. Are there?
I think anytime you can get students to actually do history or create history or be a history maker is a really meaningful experience. I mean, that's really what we're looking for in terms of getting kids for students to get out there and to actually do something. I also want to make a point about the, especially as we're going into the fall, the status that students and teachers are going to be in terms of the amount of stress and trauma that they faced through coronavirus and all of the things that have been happening. Like, art is a great way to help folks manage that stress in some way. Okay, so I've been looking at a lot of research lately that's talking about, interpreting art, creating art, as a way of kind of, again, managing stress could be helpful as well. So I think that there's a really holistic way that we can be looking at this. Is how can we educate the whole child? And I think that organizations, nonprofits, museums, things, historical houses can help with that in so many ways that are meaningful.
Anthony, Tony, can I just join in on that idea? We saw early on at COVID that art teachers were also reaching out to us for some ideas, because they were trying to all of a sudden do something that's very physical and material based in their class, virtually. And so I have a colleague who is incredibly talented, and overnight she created Art Reach with Julie. And she did a weekly art project that she demonstrated step by step by step, and she made sure that it was things that you could find around the house. We stayed away from toilet paper rolls because we knew those were valuable. But we jumped in on water bottles and foil, and then people really gravitated to these projects where they would work on them once a week. As kind of when families and teachers, when parents became art teachers, they use this resource. So a lot of historical societies have great ideas, projects that they probably do hands-on, demonstrating how to do that on the website through just a series of steps, and then offering that to both teachers and parents who are homeschooling. And then also to talk about Ameris, we've been, the Florence Griswold Museum does so much hands-on learning. When you come to the museum, you make a painting. When you come to the Fairy Village, you make a wand. And so it's all about touching and making. And we know with COVID, none of that is allowed. So we are, looking at creative ways to create craft kits in Ziploc bags with everything you need. They're inexpensive, but boy, when you get a bag full of kind of wonderful, creative, inspired material, we've gotten so much feedback from the kids when the mail arrives, how excited they are to have a bag full of stuff. And so for our Fall Fairy Village, we're looking at doing craft kits that we can then give to every family to take home so they can have that. They can visit the museum to see the Fairy Village, but they do the activity at home. And we also see it as a great way to put in some materials to kind of link us to some online or some virtual opportunities so that we can get together in a new way, but kind of build on some of those old, things that people really enjoy doing. So we are learning, and it is baby steps, but the idea of having something hands-on is, it seems like it really pays off in this virtual world.
You know what I'm saying, Dave, is that just the idea of those personal things that you're going to be sending out to folks is really, really an interesting idea, because you think about, we want people to come as a part of a school group so that later in the future, they'll come back and maybe they'll bring other folks, right? It's like an investment. What I love about what you're saying, and then also what Sally was saying earlier, is you're alluding to this idea of community care. Right? A lot of times we're hearing about self-care. We need self-care. But really, a lot of times what we need is community care. So how is it that we can care for each other? How can we help students care for the community that they're in? How can museums and institutions care for their community? And I think that if we can go towards a way of creating, again, a sense of community care, I think that will go a very, very long way.
That's great. We have a contribution from Beth in the chat just saying that a great way to connect to physical collections is to learn about an object and then make something based on that object at home. And so kind of making that bridge between the place you're sort of visiting, the collecting institution, and the home learning environment.
So I'm sorry to keep going, but you know, the Florence Griswold is famous for its painted doors and panels that the artist painted on the walls of Miss Florence's house. And so we made a very simple activity sheet of a door with blank door panels and attached it to a mini lesson of why the artist would have painted on those doors and sent it out to a few teachers that asked for them. You never know what a little gesture like that would do. And we got a picture of a little girl who decided to paint a whole door in her house. Her parents let her do the entire door, and she shared it on social media. And it was just this little spark of an idea that kind of ignites all kinds of imagination. So I'm hoping that folks don't think that they have to do really big stuff. Every little gesture can really have an impact, because we are doing things in ways that we've never done them before. And I think, you know, if you talk to colleagues about how they've managed to reinvent themselves, this is like the age of imagination. I mean, people are so creative and so clever. I know it's easy to bemoan that, but wow, we've all been forced to really be high-ordered thinkers overnight. So, yay,
I just
COVID.
like to.
No.
No, I think you're absolutely right. This is such an exciting time in many ways because you can do so many things. And we have a program called My Community and Me, which is more civics oriented, but we sort of turn that into a walk that parents can do around. I'm sorry, my dog is going. Parents can do around town with their kids, exploring their own community and understanding the kinds of people it takes to build a community.
That's great. Pretty soon it's going to be my son waking up from his nap, so no worries, Sally. We're just about at 1 o'clock here, so I just wanted to take a moment to thank our panelists for participating in this session. There's been a really great dialogue here, and I think a wonderful set of ideas that have been generated. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes, and I don't know if any of our panelists are as well, just to answer any stray questions that may not have been addressed. But I want to thank you all for being here. A special thanks to Steve, David, Sally, Allison, and Tony for their contributions. And thank you all for being here. We had, I think, at least 65 people on this call at the top. I know there are a lot of people who were going to watch the video later. So that'll be up on our YouTube website. I'll send a log of the chat to everyone who registered for this session, so you have access to those resources and links that were shared in the chat. Thank you all for being here, and we hope to see you again at another CLHO Colleague Circle.
Thank you.